Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jerry Sansing with another edition of South Texas News and Reviews. It's Friday, July the 17th, and as soon as I get the appropriate number of seconds on here to satisfy Mr. Gordy, then I'll go ahead and turn the camera on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a special guest today. This is Dr. Jim Klein, professor of history at Del Mar College. He's amazed at how efficient we are around here and how much Studio One can tolerate at any given time. We both got our badges on here, and what we want to do is start the show with a discussion of Las Brisas Energy Center versus the city of Corpus Christi. And we're both concerned with what came out in the paper this week about two of the top officials with Las Brisas Energy Center that came down here and wooed the local politicians and so forth to the point that they were backing that whole system. And then Jim and some other people got me involved with Las Brisas, and we spent a lot of years battling that high polluting area. But what's got us, and I'll let Jim address this, he's the one that really was offended by the article. So I'll turn it over to Jim, and go ahead and you give him your version of what you think.
Yes, I mean, you folks saw this in the paper already. Kathleen Smith and John Upchurch have been indicted in federal court on fraud charges, and they're the two major investors and kind of the face of the Las Brisas Energy Center project that was proposed here for Corpus Christi. They first came down here in 2008, kept badgering us about this, 09, 10, 11, 12. I think finally in 12, the courts ruled that their air permit was improperly issued, and then by 2013 they had kind of dissolved. Now the investors are suing them, and now on top of all those private lawsuits, they've got federal indictments against them as well. And what it did, I saw this article in the paper last week, I guess it was last Saturday. It reminded me, that our local public officials, elected officials, really let us down. Man, they were willing to give the store away to these people, who, by all accounts, appear to be a bunch of crooks. And it just looks to me like they didn't do their homework. And so I just wanted to, I think that it's worthwhile for people to remember that. We got another election coming up in 2016 with candidates on the ballot, and people need to be reminded of this, that the county commissioner's court ruled 4-1 to give them a 10-year tax abatement, an 80% tax abatement for 10 years. I think it was 85% tax abatement for 10 years. And despite the fact that the medical community went before the commissioner's court and said, look, this is going to be bad for people's health, it's not a good idea. We went to and testified against it as well. So you have members of the community, 400 and 500 people showed up at the initial 500, public meeting to protest this thing. And the commissioners, again, I have to be specific here. They voted in the overwhelming majority to give them this tax abatement. Oscar Ortiz, I really have to give him a lot of credit. He was the Lone Ranger, voted against that tax abatement. He went so far as to provide evidence put together by the medical community against this thing. And so I have to give a lot of props to Commissioner Ortiz for that. But Judge Lloyd Neal voted for the tax abatement, Commissioner Mike Pusley, Commissioner Chuck Kozales, and Commissioner Betty Jean Longoria all voted for this giveaway to, by all accounts, what appears to be a bunch of crooks. At the very least, they should have done their homework and didn't do that. That was in March of 2010, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2010. And then just about a month later, in April, the Las Brisas Energy Center folks, Kathleen Smith, John Upchurch, they came before the Del Mar College Board of Regents asking for an 80% tax abatement for 10 years. And majority of the Board of Regents, majority of the voting members that day voted to give them that 80% tax abatement as well. And again, this is not a unanimous vote either. I have to give a lot of props to Regents Elva Estrada, Regent Guy Watts, Regent Susan Hutchinson, all voted against that tax abatement, but the majority voted for it. President Trey McCampbell, president of the board, Minerva Arriaga, Gabe Rivas, and Jim Boggs all voted for that 80% tax abatement. And at that point, when they went before the Del Mar Board of Regents, one of the members of the public, at least one, maybe a couple of them, made this argument that the whole point of the tax abatement is to try to lure a company in from another community to kind of sweeten the deal and convince them to come. nobody else was competing with us for Las Brisas. Nobody else wanted them. And so they made the purely financial argument that there's no need for a tax abatement in this case. And the response was very, very surprising. The response from the board was that, well, this is the way that the Las Brisas Energy Center folks know that they're welcome. This is the way that we make them feel welcome here in the community. And I didn't think about this at the time. This has been eating away at me for years since then. Now, for the last 5 years since. But by that logic, if this is not done to try to lure them into our community, but just simply to make them feel welcome, then by that logic, every other business, large or small, should get a similar 80% tax abatement for 10 years. Why are we cherry picking this? Why are we showing that much favoritism to this company, which, as I said, now becomes clearly evident as being run by a bunch of crooks?
Well, that point was made, I think, by a retired attorney that was with our group. That why do you do this, folks? I mean, it's insanity. And like I say, nobody else was, excuse me, wanting Las Brisas Energy Center in their community because of the pollution. And I'm just very glad that the state saw it our way at the state court level and said, hey, this thing is improper. There's a bogus application for an air permit, and then they also, remember, Jim, the city gave them carte blanche on water.
Yeah. And again, that was not a unanimous vote either, and so I want to be clear about this. But a clear majority of the city council voted in May of 2010 to give them that water contract. Voting against were city council members Nelda Martinez, and now the mayor, and Priscilla Leal. So I have to give them a lot of credit for voting the courage of their convictions. But voting to give them this water contract was Mayor Joe Adame, Council Member Mark Scott, Council Member Chris Adler, Council Member Kevin Kieschnick, and Council Member John Matas. And again, that was after they had heard and seen testimony by the medical profession. I think it was 4 or 5 different medical doctors got up there and spoke against this project, saying this is going to be bad for people's health, and they voted for that contract nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, we had a couple of real fine local physicians that were on in our group, and they pleaded, and I've got my hats off to Mayor Martinez. She did attend one of my classes at Del Mar, and I had Dr. Wesley Stafford come in. He's an allergy immunologist, board certified, as well as pediatrician. And she sat there with her mouth hanging open as he presented the fact that the American Pediatric Association said there'd be at least 80 infants that died every year, and that's just the beginning of, not to mention the number of lungs in infants that would go would not develop normally. And then we had Dr. Silverman, cardiologist, and he said that the cardiology patients, respiratory problems don't go well hand in hand with cardiac problems. So he said that there would probably be a lot of the cardiac patients that would suffer severely for that, or either that or die. So we had quite a group, but the diehards down there, all they could see was that money flashing in front of them.
Yeah. Dr. Mary Peterson testified as well,
right.
Saying that this is a bad idea,
yeah.
And I have to give her a lot of credit as well. A lot, and that was what was most disturbing is when I spoke against this project a couple of different times, and my background is history, and so they could look at me and say, well, you're not really an expert in the area, and that's a good argument. I'm a member of the community, but I'm not an expert in the community in the field. But when the medical community itself, the experts in the area, stand up and say, don't do this. This is going to be bad for people's health. It's going to kill 80 infants every year unnecessarily, and they just went and signed off on it anyway. It was just, I was flabbergasted by that.
Well, it was. I remember these two, Mr. Upchurch and Kathleen Smith. I think we were in Sinton at that would be Sanpat County, I think.
Right.
We were there at a hearing because with the prevailing southeastern breezes around here, they were going to take the full brunt of the majority of the pollution from that facility. So I went up there loaded with resumes. Kathleen Smith made the statement. She said, nobody with the Clean Economy Coalition or anybody else that's fighting this know what they're talking about. So I stood up and very bluntly said, well, I sure as hell know what I'm talking about, and gave the commissioners a resume and handed one to her. And so I guess she packed up her little laptop and left after that. But you know, the snow job that they were able to pull off with this city was just phenomenal. So I think the purpose of the talk today is just to say, you know, city council members and commissioners and Del Mar College regents and anybody else that's involved with these tax abatements and so forth, would you please do your homework and background and find out how legitimate these people are before you get started giving away the shop?
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
So anyway, then we have some other things that I was going to talk about with Jim's permission here. I think what goes hand in hand with that is the Destination Bayfront, which was squelched. I did have a t-shirt similar to this that I designed that says "No Destination Bayfront." That probably, well, I know it did, it perturbed my direct boss, the top boss at Del Mar College, Mr. Trey McCampbell, and I've got a picture that I keep around of him on TV. And it was in the Caller Times when they were watching the results of the vote for Destination Bayfront.
Pretty lopsided.
Yeah, well, it was 65%, which is phenomenal in this place. And then just recently, this last week, city aims to develop a park. Now, the Memorial Coliseum sat right there on the bayfront, and I think it was on purpose. I can't state this because I don't mean, you know, I can't read people's minds. But I think it was on the mind of the entire city council at that time to go ahead and tear that building down. So they quit doing any maintenance on that facility at all. We've got a American Bank Center that costs us roughly $750,000 to $1 million per year for you people to keep the doors open when the Coliseum was already paid for. And I've never been, I don't go to venues down there. I refuse to go to the American Bank Center. But when I hear the attendance and see certain TV clips and so forth, that place isn't half full usually. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But what happened was the city decided to go ahead and rip down the Memorial Coliseum. And that is a memorial to World War II dead vets from Nueces County. I think it was just under 400. And it was an architecturally significant facility. And I hope I can get George Clower on the show soon. He was one of 5 with our group that were sued by the city for putting a halt to that demolition. Now, in the beginning of the demolition, they were very meticulously ripping the roof off, bagging that stuff up because it was asbestos laden, and hauling it off. And the workers had respirators on and masks and dust uniforms and so forth and so on, and gloves. And so they were showing that in the newspaper as being a very meticulous happening. And then as soon as the 5 of us went down and got Judge Klager to sign a halt to the demolition, then no work was done on the thing on the outside. We do have evidence that the demolition company, under direct court orders to cease, were inside stripping the wire out and so forth. So
Against the court order.
Against the court order. Yeah, we've got affidavits to the fact that the workers would go across the street to that little motel over there, and they would sleep all day, and then they'd go over and work at night and come in real all laden with dust and so forth and so on. And then we've got people that stopped and heard all the activity going on in that building. Well, as soon as the 13th Court of Appeals, the city appealed the thing, and they said, no, go ahead and rip it down. Then they went in with bulldozers and knocked the building down. And there, I've got samples, folks. There was asbestos-laden stuff all over the sidewalks, blowing down the streets, and they just essentially collapsed the rest of the roof. They did not properly take it apart.
Yeah, don't they normally put in some sort of something sort of shield so that the stuff doesn't blow all over
Yeah.
Kingdom Come?
Right. Well, what they did was they had the workers up there taking it off a square foot at a time and then
Wow.
bagging it up immediately. But when they collapsed that roof, I've got samples of the materials that were outside of their fence line all over the streets and sidewalks, and I've got some videotape. And it's not any chore for me to confirm asbestos, so I did that microscopically. So that was a real a trip. Now, what I'm getting at is Carlos Valdez, the former district attorney around here and then city attorney, decided to sue the five of us, they call us the Friends of the Coliseum, for $65,000. Now, the bond we signed was for $30,000. So he said that other damages had occurred. Now, if you read that contract that was between the city and the demolition company, it states that no one incurs any damages during a court-ordered halt and demolition.
It says that right
In the contract.
Wow.
And Carlos Valdez, in court, when they sued us, stated that citizens in this town do not have any vested interest or standing in any contract that the city makes with any vendor. So we have no rights.
Wow.
You know, it's all up to the city fathers to write these contracts the way they want them, and we have no say-so in there. And I've got that on court record when he said that. Everybody almost fell out of their chairs. Then we appealed to the 13th Court of Appeals, and they said, would you go ahead and we back up the Friends of the Coliseum, take it back to court and dismiss it because, you know, we agree there were no damages that were accrued. And then the city went back and asked for a second opinion from the 13th Court of Appeals, and then they kicked it back and said, no, we stand by our original ruling, so send it back. And now we've got a new city attorney, I don't know how he pronounces it, I've never met the man. It's either Risley or Risley. And he's hell-bent now, he's going to take it and run it through the Supreme Court, Texas Supreme Court.
Really?
He says that we have damaged the city and that taxpayers don't need to be standing up for their rights and suing the city or you know, halting work like that. So he wants to make it quite clear to the citizens that they better not.
Seems to me like they could spend their money on something else.
Well, I mean, for $30,000. Now, another thing that we found out, Jim, I don't know if you're aware of this. Mr. Gordy came up with this one. He found out that in 2014, from January 1 to December 31st, the city spent over $3.5 million on outside legal counsel.
Wow.
Okay. Now we have, and I didn't know this. This astounded me. Did you know that we've got 21 attorneys
They do not. No.
that work for the city?
Wow.
Now why they can't do the work, I don't know. But $3.5 million is a lot of money.
On top of the salary for the 21.
Yeah. So how much is it costing them to go after us for? Now they want $30,000, the original bond. So I don't know. If I were you folks out there, I'd pick up the phone and call your city councilman and say, hey, you better back off of this because it's going to cost us far more than that. And if you are using city coffers to go after citizens just to keep them quiet, then you know, I hate to equate that back to Nazi Germany, but and some other dictatorships. But that's what it appears to be to me. I mean, you're the historian, you know.
You know, it has had a chilling effect on the community. People ever since then have been very, very hesitant to sign any sort of petition. And you got to wonder if that's what the overall intent of that action was, is to try to stop all this, to try to stop this involvement by the public.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, they say that that citizens need to do it democratically instead of through the courts. Well, what do you do democratically besides go to the court and get an injunction against a demolition? And the crime is, folks, and what I was getting at is we now have in the newspaper, city aims to develop a park. Now, I have never seen a bigger abortion, I call it, than the reroute of Shoreline. You go from 3 lanes down to 2, and it curves around in some hairpin curves, and people are going to get killed out there. And there's no way that somebody can walk across that street. I drove down there for the first time a couple of months ago, and I wanted to take a left-hand turn on one of the side streets. Well, it's blocked off. You can't do that. You have to go all the way down and come back around. And it's congested, folks. It really is. It's a mess down there. Now, with that bond to develop a park or the reroute, then there was, I think, $5.1 million that was left over. And now what the city wants to do is use that to go and put up shade and bathroom facilities in what is now, what was the Destination Bayfront area. So why would you tear down an acre of shade down there with an architecturally significant arched roof?
Right.
It was freestanding. For $1 million, they could have re-roofed that thing completely with a standing copper seam,
Right.
and let the salt water develop that beautiful green patina down there.
It already had bathroom facilities in
Yeah,
it.
it already was plumbed for bathroom facilities. And now you drive down there and they've got a bunch of front-end loaders and all kinds of construction stuff parked out there.
Wow.
And, it's a mess down there. So, again, folks, pay attention to who you're going to vote for the next go-around at City Council. All I can say is that you may want to consider voting all the bums out down there, as far as I'm concerned. Have you got anything else on the city?
Well,
Go ahead.
you talked about this, I think, or alluded to this anyway, that and then this, the Las Brisas issue, the Coliseum for that matter as well. I mean, our public officials are not always serving the public as well as they could. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the problem has to do with the fact that there's so much money in the political process now. Mm-hmm. And we're not really getting the best and the brightest, which is what we should be trying to do, elect the best and the brightest to these offices. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think we're doing it right now. We've got a system by which, in this last go-around, last election in 2014, one of the candidates for city council spent $70,000 to get elected to the city council, a job that pays $6,000 a year. I mean, what is the public supposed to think about that? And beyond the impression, bad impression that it leaves, the $70,000, what that does is it precludes, it really narrows the field of choices. Because a lot of people are going to say, I'm not going to spend I don't have $70,000 to spend. And so your field of potential candidates really shrinks dramatically. You don't always get the best and the brightest, I think, because of that.
Well, I've always referred to, in the last decade, the city council as being a real estate cartel. Now, in order to get the $70,000 to run, I don't think that was personal money, and not all of it. But if you've got, what is the motive behind people that will spend that kind of money for a $6,000 a year job, unless there's something in it for the donors?
Yeah.
And that, I think that was the rest of the developers and real estate people around here and other contractors. Yeah. So it's you need to be real careful, folks. And what I would do is take the person that puts the least amount of money, a reasonable amount of money, into the campaign, and vote for those people, because they're not going to have some special interest behind the desire to make more money. And then what really burns me up is we don't have the wind farm going in at Chapman Ranch. Somebody said that our last meeting that it's still a rice paddy out there. The thing is, it floods. So how are you going to go out and develop that for a major subdivision? Yeah. I mean, it's just...
That doesn't seem like the wisest use of our resources either. To sprawl out into a floodplain, it's just not a good idea. And I don't know, this is an environmental issue, but more than that, I think really it's a financial issue, because it costs a certain amount of money to push wastewater and fresh water every foot that you have to push it. And if we spread out that much further, it's going to make our water system that much less efficient, financially.
And we've got such poor infrastructure right now. Jim's on the CARP committee, which is the Coles and Ropes Park. And the main thrust of that is why do we have Escherichia coli, everybody calls it E. coli, in the bay. That's fecal-borne, folks. I mean, that's where you find it, is in the bowels and intestines and so forth of warm-blooded animals. And every time it rains, we get a real increase in the number of bacterial cells in the bay. And see, that's also an indication. I stress this to my students. I said, now, I'm going to show you how to confirm E. coli contamination very, very rapidly. And it's 100% accurate. And I said, why would you want to be concerned about E. coli in the water? I mean, you've got it in your milk, you've got it, in other sources and so forth, but not at these levels. And they said, well, I don't know, why would you be concerned about it? And I said, well, because it indicates fecal contamination, which means if somebody's got cholera or one of the other diseases, which is much harder to confirm,
Typhus,
it gives you a heads up that you have a fecal contamination problem, and that could lead to polio virus in the water and so forth and so on.
So it's kind of a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I do know that how long was the CART committee going? 3 years now?
We are about 3 years and 3 months.
3 years and 3 months. And another one of our Clean Economy Coalition members is on there.
Right.
And she was very discouraged about what the city's doing with the outcome of that. So I don't know if you want to say anything about it.
Well, you're right. I mean, the E. coli levels spike when we have a major rain event, and they spike to dangerous levels for about 24, maybe 48 hours or so, and then they come back down again. So we know it's related to rain events. We're not sure exactly what that is exactly. Somehow or other, it's coming from the storm drains, I guess, and that's what our CARP committee is kind of tussling with right now, is trying to kind of put together an implementation plan. We've been instructed to do this by the TCEQ for the city, and they want input from the public, not just the city officials, to put together an implementation plan to bring those E. coli levels down. And we're kind of going back and forth with the city now about what exactly is causing this, and then what steps should we take to try to reduce that.
Right. And also, with modern genetics and so forth, you can pretty well determine the source of the bacterial contamination. I mean, E. coli, like I say, is in the bowels and intestines of warm-blooded animals. So, where did it come from? The city tends to think that it's a combination of dogs and cats and runoff out of people's yards where the dogs and cats have been defecating. Possums, and then the homeless. That came up. That one really tore me up. So I really don't know that the homeless are using the storm sewers for the restroom, but it is funny. But they won't. To me, I have not seen any clearance for the city to test that and find out, is it human, is it from birds, is it from raccoons?
Right. That should be the first step, really. I mean, bacteria source tracking. This technology has really advanced quite a bit. I guess 10 years ago or 20 years ago it was quite expensive. Now the expenses come way down, and so it only costs just a few $100s to conduct each test. And so this should really be step one. I mean, if you want to try to reduce the E. coli levels in the bay, first of all, you got to try to find out what it's coming from. And if the tests determine that it's mostly from dog poop, well, then we know what the problem is, and we got to take steps to try to reduce that. If it ends up coming from human waste instead, then we got to take different steps if we want to try to get those bacteria levels down to a safe level where people can swim in the bay again, go out kite surfing, kite boarding, and that sort of thing.
Well, the thing is, in the sections that the neighborhoods around Coles and Rose Park, if you take a look at those, there's some older houses where the sewer lines, the raw sewer lines, were made out of clay, and as the time goes on, those tend to collapse, and they're close enough to the stormwater outlets to have a profound effect. And I just don't think the city is prepared now that we can't fix streets. And won't, apparently, okay, then I don't know what they do if we had a whole bunch of sewer lines that had to be dug up. And Environmental Protection Agency is watching that like a hawk. So
I don't know, folks. Let's get some people in there that will spend. I think I saw if you have 5 different E. coli samples run from the company out of Florida, I think if you ran 4 or 5 of them at one time, it's $175 a piece.
Wow.
And that's cheap, folks.
Yeah.
That's real cheap. And to get that information, let's find out what's going on. Just don't keep. I've used this analogy before, and Jim knows it, but I use the Manhattan Alley Cat as an analogy to that, and that's what this city does. And I went to a big meeting, a scientific meeting in Manhattan, and we had the afternoon off, so I went and saw a play on Broadway. And I was walking back to the hotel, and I was standing mid block. And if you look at New York, they've got alleyways in between these big, huge, high-rise buildings. So I was standing there wondering whether to dash across the traffic or not, and risk a jaywalking ticket, which they'll give you in New York. And I heard this scratching on the sidewalk behind me, and where the alley met the sidewalk. And I looked around, and that poor cat, old scraggly male cat, had done his business on the sidewalk, and he was scratching at it, trying to get enough dust and dirt to cover it up, which is an impossible task. Okay, so I use that. Here's the city making big messes, and they don't have anything to cover it up with. So I thought that was quite appropriate. I know the city fathers don't appreciate that, and that goes into also Del Mar Board of Regents and the commissioners of the county and the state. I mean, it's just a plague. So anyway, when are we going to get the streets fixed?
I don't know. That's going to be a big tussle. And I do have to say this, that the problem we got right now with streets in particular, it's not the making of just the current city council. People disagree about the exact number of years, but I'm guessing 20, 25, maybe 30 years of inaction. And that's what's so troubling now, is that if we're 20 years, even just 20 years behind, you get caught back up again.
Right. Well, I moved here about 27 years ago now, 26, and the streets were in pretty good shape. I mean, and the city was a pretty pristine place to be. It's a lovely town. And I moved down here for the saltwater fishing and the activities. So, but over the years, I've seen the whole thing just go essentially down the tubes. And, rather than patch them up, and then I've had Mr. Gordy Jack, who was the former president of Taxpayers Association. They voted me in about 1.5 years ago, as if I didn't have anything else to do. But I've enjoyed every second of it, folks. But he got all over the city one time because they leave rain in the potholes, and then they throw the asphalt in there. And then if there's leaves and debris around there when they're sweeping it up, they put all that into the hole with the water, and then think that the asphalt's going to stick in there. Well, 3 days later, it's coming right back out, folks.
Yeah.
So, and then there's sections that are just a checkerboard of patchwork. Just go in and close it down, bite the bullet, and go ahead and, pave the whole street. Do it right. And then if you do, hold the company accountable, because if you drive down Ocean Drive now, I've seen, streets in third world countries that are smoother and in better shape than Ocean is. And that wasn't done, 5-6 years ago when they resurfaced that. Yeah. So, if you're going to hold somebody accountable, not the citizens, folks, go after these contractors that don't perform. Yeah. And I think Horn Road, they fired the group that had that contract.
Really?
Yeah. And then the county hired them. I won't get into that one. All right. Well, I guess what we do is switch gears to one of my favorite sports, and that's my employer, Del Mar College. Now, a couple of years ago, I got real curious about something that was said in the Del Mar College Board of Regents workshop by our chief financial officer, who, by the way, has never had an accounting course. But what he said was that he had exhausted all activities and methods and so forth to collect debt that was owed to Del Mar College. So I triggered through Public Information Act, I asked for all those debts for a certain period of time, and I went over with a CPA, a master's degree accountant, and bachelor's in accounting, CPA with 30 years experience. And there sat 5-foot stack of paperwork. So we sat there, it was at least 4 to 5 feet tall, okay, if you added up all the piles on this big table. So I guess it was, I hit the lottery, and as we were going through, we found 3 sheets of paper for one of the write-offs. And it was a request from the CFO to the president to write off, I think it was $185,000. And then the signed letter back from the president, and then it gave a couple of pages of who owed the college and what was written off. Now my teeth almost fell out when I saw that Texas A&M University Kingsville owed Del Mar College $54,000 some odd dollars, and the Coastal Bend Council of Governments was $89,000, and then there were a couple of them that were about $12,000, $13,000, but one of them struck us, Verizon Telephone. They wrote a $1,200 to $1,300 portion off of that. Now when we investigated that and called Verizon, they said, oh no, we paid that. And then they also said, we've got a letter, it's not a letter of credit, there's a term for it, I'm not a CPA. Ed Bennett is the CPA, he knows what that term is. But they can take that to the bank, that piece of paper, and they can get paid.
Right.
And nobody attempted to collect it. Now they said, and there was a bunch of letters to students saying, you owe us this kind of money or so much money, and if you don't pay it, you can't get transcripts. And I asked for any evidence that they were trying to collect that money.
Right.
And I was hoping that there'd be a whole stack of the return receipts that you get, the green cards from the post office, or collection agency letters, or lawsuits. You can go down and file that in the
Small
court,
claims, yeah.
small claims court. Nothing existed there.
Wow.
So we've been after that, and now we've uncovered the fact that Del Mar over the last 6 years has written off $2.838 million in bad debts. So just this last week, or earlier this week on Tuesday, we noticed on the agenda for the Board of Regents meeting that the CFO was going to have a talk on an updated collection effort. So he gave them all this razzle-dazzle over there about how they were going to ramp up this in the spring semester. And now they're going to turn all those over to collection agencies and allow the agency to add 30% of the bill and collect it, and that would be their fee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, and then some of the board members, I think it was news to some of those regents, Jim, to tell you the truth, because they were just astounded. We haven't been doing this before? Okay. So there's a real lack of communication between the administration and the board at times. And what I don't understand is the board president, I think has earned an MBA. I don't know if it was in accounting or what, but he should have known better and been paying a lot closer attention to all this. So now, and then the Caller Times put out an article on the 15th, 2 days ago. It says, Del Mar College to ramp up debt collection efforts. Well, I don't know how that got stimulated, except that Mr. Bennett and I formed the DS investigations, and we've been looking at this real hard. Now, one thing that's happened also is when we asked for certain information under Public Information Act, the estimated charges for providing that to us was $26.7 million, and they said that they were going to have to make copies of 105 million documents, and it would take 120 man years to provide it. And then all of a sudden, when the whistle was blown locally in the news on Channel 6, then all of a sudden we went into a mediation, and You know how much that 200 and something pages that he asked for cost him? Nothing. So I think that was a real attempt to go ahead and run us off as citizens and taxpayers. And another thing I'd like to do is request that you call your regent. You've got 3 at-large regents that are responsible for you, and then you've got 1 district regent for your particular neighborhood. And call them up and say, you know, I really would like to be able to come over here and speak to you people under the under the public comments section. But now what you have to do, if you go over, you start the meeting at 1 o'clock, they go for a couple of hours, and then they go into closed session for an hour or 2.
Right.
So, you know, it's late in the afternoon before you would be able to get to talk.
And you don't really know when.
No,
Yeah.
and you don't know when. You have to sit there and wait it out. So, last meeting in June, I sent a letter to all the board members and presented it to them. I guess it was presented to them. I took it over to the secretary. I assume it was. And I requested that they put it on the agenda and take a vote on having those comments at the beginning of the meeting. And city council did that finally. And no response from that whatsoever. So I went over this last meeting and I asked them verbally. But my point was, Del Mar College is a taxpayer-funded institution of higher education. So you taxpayers are paying for that. You know, you pay so much money, property tax, into that district. Then the taxpayers are the majority of the people that go out and vote for you. Okay? So and what they do is they're voting for you to go to Del Mar and conduct the business and take care of their money. And then you won't allow them to go up there and talk. Now, I do know of a gentleman that was there at this last meeting, and one of the regents, I won't name that person, but that regent said that he did not want that, well, that narrowed it down, didn't it? That person did not want to have the thing until the end of the meeting because he didn't want to hear a bunch of people complaining up front in the beginning of the meeting and taking up their time. And if they really had a desire to speak to the board, then they could tough it out, and it would show that they really were sincere if they stuck around for a couple of 3 hours until they finished the meetings, closed meetings, and then had the comments. I must admit that I think when I was sitting there in the audience along with Mr. Gordy, that the president of the board, the one that's not real fond of me, but what he did was he said, we're going to have a long session, closed session, so I'm going to go ahead and put the public comments before we break and go into closed session. So that's when Mr. Gordy chewed on him a bit about Del Mar suing the AG's office. I'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, that may be a start. But I did request, I talked to him and I said, would you please respond to this, so next meeting would you have a vote to see if you can get those up front, and that way. And then, you know, the only sensible people in town is CCISD board, and they have their meetings after 5 o'clock in the afternoon so the public can attend those. So I know that's a drag there, city fathers and mothers, but you know, you need to remember who brought you to the dance. Isn't that what Chris Adler used to say? You gotta. So anyway, that we'll see if that happens. But the best thing you can do is to call your elected representatives, whether it's the city council, CCISD, Del Mar, you know, county, whatever, and let them know what you think. Yeah. And I think that's what the First Amendment's all about. I think it's freedom of speech. And not like the Neville brothers put it, it's freedom of speech as long as you don't say too much. All right, and then we have a fact where I won't get into the details. I've already done that before, and it's been on Channel 6 News. But I had a little disagreement, I'll say, with my department chair and my dean at Del Mar College. Things are not fair and equitable over there among the faculty members. And so my department chair decided he'd go ahead and write a disciplinary action letter that he wanted to put into my personnel file. And it was all based and predicated, I'll just say it, on a bunch of, I'll just blurt it out, lies. Because I'm not real popular after I tried to uncover some stuff. So then, within a few days, I requested information through the Public Information Act of the state of Texas and wanted to get the information I needed to defend myself, because I did appeal that. We were going to have a hearing. And they took a very expensive attorney up in Austin, and they went ahead and contracted with them to write for an opinion from the Attorney General. That's the way you can hold up the 10-day limit on public information. Mm-hmm. So then the Attorney General, after a while, rendered an opinion, said give him the vast majority of it. Well, they forced the hearing. I did not know that the Attorney General had said that. So they forced me into the hearing without my information. And then after that, they sued the AG's office and wanted them to reconsider this. Now, if you read the Public Information Act, it says governmental bodies cannot request a reconsideration of any of the Attorney General's opinions, period. So once they rule, it's over with. So now we're spending a great deal of money with attorneys that are going to sue the Attorney General's office to withhold that information from me. Now, I don't know what in the world is so incriminating in there that they just can't stand the fact that I would be privileged to it. But it's information I needed to defend myself. Now, what they do, Jim, is they claim attorney-client privilege. They say that as if it were in a court, and it's not.
Right.
And then they say, well, it's pending an anticipated litigation. Now, does that give people the right to withhold information?
Yeah.
Are they reading my mind?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know that I'm going to go sue Del Mar College and these people involved? And so then what we've got is that they file a lawsuit saying they want to appeal the ruling from the AG's office. Now that's reconsideration, I think, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So and you spend this money with the Attorney General's office and these attorneys through Del Mar College, but this is under the name of Del Mar College. I've got a copy of the lawsuit. Another person got a copy of this within 4 days of asking Del Mar for it. It took over 2 or 3 weeks for me to get it, but I finally got a copy of this. And this is what was submitted by that expensive attorney folks up there. But it says Del Mar College District versus Ken Paxton, Attorney General. And they claim this. Now, in one of those, they said in their pleading to the AG's office, they said that the hearing that I had requested, appeals hearing, was a pseudo-judicial hearing. No, it's quasi. I think they use the term quasi.
Really?
So then I said, well, if it's going to be a legal hearing, judicial hearing, I want the information under discovery.
Right.
And they said, we don't have to give it to you. So I don't know what's in there, Jim, but things are not all that well at Del Mar College when it comes to this, and I'm a little bit concerned. So then I rewrote the 3 requests, and just to see what would happen, and I specified names of individuals rather than asking for a little bit more general information about who was doing what and who was not. And here's a letter from the attorneys that was July the 14th. I just received it yesterday, I think it was, or day before. And it says, Dear General Paxton, here we go. We're suing you for this, so we want you on the second round of this stuff to withhold that under attorney-client privilege.
Oh.
And they state in here that their lawsuit is for a reconsideration of their prior judgment, the AG's. And the Public Information Act states clearly that you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're getting away with this, but, you know, and somebody said, well, why are they doing this? And I said, well, the attorneys want the billing hours. I mean, that's what it's all about. They're not going to be in any jeopardy. If somebody gets sanctioned for this, it's going to be Del Mar College. And the attorneys are off the hook, and they'll probably go in and earn more money defending Del Mar against that. I mean, it's a whole ploy to spend an awful lot of money to protect themselves and make a whole lot of money for these attorneys. And this attorney's not even in town. Okay? This group's out of Austin, Texas. And they're, I believe, about $400 an hour.
Wow.
And then they have to go to them through the contract with Augustin Rivera, who's the Board of Regents attorney at Del Mar College. And when these two are on the phone, Mr. Rivera is billing $175 an hour, and they're billing $400 an hour. So you've got a grand total being billed to Del Mar taxpayers of about $575 an hour to not give me information that I'm legally.
You know, in this last legislative session, the state legislature voted to cut Del Mar College's funding. We lost about $750,000 annually this last legislative session. So money is going to be increasingly precious. And I just think that the college would spend its money more wisely than suing the Attorney General of the state of Texas.
Well, you know, I mean, and then in this hearing, another attorney, okay, Ms. Cano, said, did you ask for, you know, all this information and stuff? Well, you're not supposed to ask me why. Anytime somebody requests information through Public Information Act, the requester cannot be asked why you want that information. And I've got 10-minute tape, audio tape of her saying, well, why did you want this? And why did you want that? And, you know, that complaint of mine is already filed down at the DA's office for everybody's information. That's going to come out on the news here pretty quick. But they keep going and they keep hammering with this, and they just can't quite figure it out. That you know, you can't just legally mess people around. And we're spending a fortune. I think our budget alone is now it's somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 a year that we budget for legal. And then this company also out of Austin did the work when they spent just under $7 million for that 95-acre swamp out there at Rod Field in Yorktown to build a south campus. And that's a whole other story on that one. That's going to be wild. And then they're preparing. I understand that there was a board retreat at the town club before it closed down. The public was invited if you wanted to go attend that, and it ran about 6 hours long, and Del Mar paid for it.
Wow.
So, I mean, can't they do a retreat over at Pizza Hut or something? I'm not advertising Pizza Hut, folks. I'm not supposed to advertise anything here. So I guess there were a lot of tears over there when the town club went under and they closed the doors over there, because I understand that's a very frequent, Del Mar administrators are very frequent visitors over there to have meetings and stuff. So I guess one of these days I'll have to ask for the charges over the past 5 years to the town club. It's crazy, but they don't worry about that. And then I can trigger. I know I've got about 3 hours that I could trigger Jim with the fact that shared governance is not being practiced at Del Mar College. Jim is the Del Mar president of the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, and you're the state
President as well.
The state president as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so academic freedom and shared governance is very close to our hearts. And when we brought in, well, we had a president here for less than a year, I think. He came in and started trying to mess things around. We formed that chapter here at Del Mar College, and at the time it was the largest one in the country, I think. It's not any longer. We've lost some people, but we had a function for Dr. Escamilla and his family hoping that, you know, we could change things around here. But it's becoming, you know, less and less education and for instruction, and more about building a bloated administration. It's called Administrative Bloat by the Wall Street Journal. So I won't get you cranked off.
Yeah, I could go off on quite a while on that.
Yeah, well, it's and then I've got about 4 minutes left, Jim. I'll just say that in our department, when this thing happened, and I started asking questions, and I got that disciplinary action letter, the biology faculty members, we've got physics and chemistry and so forth involved with our and geology and biology in our department. And 5 of us faculty members asked to have a faculty meeting with the department chair and our dean, and they refused. So after that was refused twice, I sent a letter, a request to the president, Dr. Escamilla, to see if he could call a meeting of the biology faculty, and I haven't heard from him since. And that is not shared governance, because we have some issues with course content, and if you read the shared governance board policy at Del Mar, it says that the faculty is responsible for course content and so forth and so on. So
As it should be.
yeah,
Just not always practiced that way. Yeah.
but yeah, and then there's some other things coming up that are very disturbing that I'll bring up later. That faculty members will have committees and write different policies and so forth and so on, and then the administration says, no, we're going to write them. We don't like the language in this. So I'll saddle that horse a little bit later. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We've got roughly 2 minutes left. Jim, is there anything you'd like to address the public, like go vote, how important it is?
Yeah, I mean, that's a biggie. And I know, folks, that the ballot can get confusing, that you've got politicians, candidates who are telling stories on each other quite often which are not true. And so it can get confusing as well, and it discourages people. But you know, we claim to live in a representative democracy, and the only way that can work is if people participate.
Yeah.
This last year, 2014, voter turnout rate in Nueces County was 31%. And that's 31% of registered voters. We know a lot of people are not even registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, register to vote. It doesn't mean you have to, but you have the option to. You need to register at least 30 days before the election. Very easy to do. It takes less than 2 minutes. They have voter registration cards down at the county courthouse at the voter registration office on the ground floor. Walk in the pond side entrance, and you turn to your left, and you'll see the office right there. It takes 2 minutes to fill it out. And then vote on election day, because, as I said, we get the government that we deserve, locally, state level, and nationally.
And there are some citizens around that are qualified and certified to go to different places and register. I know Jim and his wife and my mother-in-law and some people do that at Del Mar quite frequently. They go to the student center and sit there, and if the students aren't registered, then they can do it right there on the spot.
Yeah.
And that's a real good service, and I appreciate Jim doing that. And if you want to, I'm certified too, as far as I can tell. I'll give you the email address in a minute. You can always contact me, and we can get you registered.
Sure.
But it's important that you participate in that democratic process, folks, or you're going to be run right over the top of you with city attorneys and you know, attorneys out of Austin are going to sue the AG to withhold information from you. Well, we're down to about a minute, so I thank you, Jim, for coming and enlightening us. It's some very important stuff. So I'm going to turn this thing off. And
Good. Sure.
yeah, I appreciate it. If you